Kyle Busch has another new sponsor for this weekend at Auto Club. The Daytona 500 TV ratings have been officially revealed, and there's been a major debate around the commercials and overtimes in NASCAR. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to our video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed for today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight into those really quickly. We're going to start with talking about Kroger, as Adam Stern put this tweet out yesterday, but Kroger congratulated Ricky Stenhouse Jr. on his Daytona 500 win. Obviously, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. picked up his first Daytona 500 victory, a massive win for Ricky. Really great to see that Kroger, which is a big part of the JTG Doherty brand, really great to see them congratulating Ricky Stenhouse Jr. on his Daytona 500 victory. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 75th anniversary ad. Now, during the Daytona 500, they play multiple ads around the 75th anniversary. And there's going to be 3 ad campaigns that they're going to be running. The one they ran at Daytona 500 is the first one. There's going to be one around the future, and I believe one around the upcoming present at the moment. I think it's really cool that they're doing this for the 75th anniversary. I thought the ad was honestly really cool that they did, and I really enjoyed seeing that ad. I think it looked really awesome and really great. I thought it was really great, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Costa Oil. As it was announced yesterday that Costa Oil is going to sponsor Ryan Ellis for 3 races in 2023. Costa Oil has been a loyal partner of the Alpha Prime Racing Group and also a big loyal partner of Ryan Ellis throughout his career. So really great to see that Costa Oil is returning to sponsor Ryan Ellis in 2023 for 3 races. Wishing Ryan the best of luck, and hopefully he has some good runs with the Costa Oil brand. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Hux. As it was announced yesterday morning that Hux is going to sponsor Sam Mayer for 5 races in 2023. Hux will sponsor him at Nashville, Road America, and the Chicago Street Course, and a couple other races, including the Darlington race in September as well. Really exciting stuff. Hux has been a loyal sponsor of Sam Mayer since last year, so good to see that they are returning, and I'm really happy for sure to see that they're returning to sponsor Sam Mayer. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Gear Wrench. As it was announced yesterday, Gear Wrench is going to sponsor Tyler Reddick for 3 races in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2023. They'll sponsor him at Auto Club, Las Vegas next weekend, and Darlington in May or in September. Really great to see the Gear Wrench is stepping up to sponsor Tyler Reddick. Of course, they're basically being more in Toyota now. I think it's really great to see the Gear Wrench is partnering up with Tyler Reddick, a new partner for him. I wonder maybe in the future if they could, maybe in the future, sponsor Tyler Reddick in the Cup Series. That'd be something to watch. It'd be really cool to see, and I'm happy to see the Gear Wrench is going to sponsor Tyler Reddick for multiple races. Really exciting stuff, and also confirms that Reddick will run 3 races with that group. Really exciting stuff and great to see for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Gear Wrench once again. As Gear Wrench is going to be joining the Toyota family in 2023, and their Toyota lineup has been revealed for what drivers are partnering up with. The 6 drivers are as follows: Tyler Reddick, Stuart Friesen, Jesse Love, Sean Higurani, Brent Cruz, and Cannon McIntosh. Really exciting stuff. Really great for all those drivers. They've got Gear Wrench partnering with them. That means they have another sponsor and branding that will work with them. And I think it's really great to see the Gear Wrench is partnering up with all these people. Really exciting stuff. Happy for all 6 of these drivers that Gear Wrench will partner up with them. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Monster Energy. Now, Adam Stern reported on this in 2311, announces as well that Monster Energy will start promoting its new flavored alcohol beverage for the first time, with Beast Unleashed set to serve as a primary partner in multiple races for Tyler Reddick in 2023. It's also noted in the tweet that the paint scheme is going to be revealed tomorrow morning or tomorrow afternoon. Holy crap, we're actually getting a different looking Monster Energy car. For the last few years, we haven't really seen a variety of changes to the Monster Energy brand for a very long time. So I think this is a great thing that they're doing, and a great initiation that they're doing, that they're going to be changing up the Monster Energy cans and the Monster Energy brand itself. I think it's really exciting stuff. I love that they are changing it, and honestly, I think it's a really good change for Monster Energy. I can't wait to see the new look of the Monster Energy car, and that will be revealed tomorrow, and we'll probably talk about it on Friday later this week, or whenever it does get revealed, but I think it's really exciting stuff and great to see for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the SRX. As the SRX over the last couple of days has announced some pretty big promotions. First, Kevin Ridley has been promoted to the Director of Car Construction. Then, yesterday, SRX announced that Bronson Butcher will be moved to Director of Car Performance for the SRX. Kevin Ridley has been part of the SRX for the last 2 years, if I'm not mistaken, so he deserves this opportunity to be moved to higher up at the SRX. Bronson Butcher is joining the SRX this year. This will be the first time he's part of the SRX and will be the Director of Car Performance. I think in general, this is some really exciting stuff to see both these people are getting promoted or brought into the SRX. They continue to expand, and in general, I think this is really awesome for the SRX. Really exciting stuff, and glad to see that both of them are going to be joining. I think it's really awesome and really exciting stuff, to be honest with you. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about super speedway races. Now, Jeff Gluck put out a tweet yesterday about super speedway races, and one thing he noticed that I found very interesting is that there's been 11 straight different winners for super speedway racers. Among those drivers that have won have been Ryan Blaney, Bubba Walls, Chase Elliott, Michael McDowell. Last week, of course, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Joey, I don't think Logano won one, but Keselowski and a couple other people have been noted that have won with the super speedway races. I think it's really great on traditional super speedways, I should say. I think it's really interesting to see that there are a lot of different people that have won on super speedways. Will we continue to see a 12th different winner? That's one thing we're going to watch to wait and see, but I found that very interesting. They've had 11 straight different super speedway racers on Daytona International Speedway or Talladega Super Speedway, because they did not count Atlanta, because if they counted Atlanta, Chase Elliott would have been a straight winner, and I think William Byron might have been counted if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not entirely sure. That being said, though, it's interesting. You've had a lot of different people that have won, and maybe at Talladega in April of this year, we'll see another different winner. Maybe we'll see like Kyle Larson win somehow. Who knows? But I think that's very interesting for the Cup Series that it has been that many different winners in a row. And now we're going ahead to on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Riley Herbst. As Trey Ryan puts out a lot of really, really good stats, and I think that's a guy you should definitely check out on social media. But he put out a very interesting stat, and he says that Riley Herbst is the only driver to finish in top 10 in a debut for the Cup Series, the Xfinity Series, the Truck Series, the ARCA Series, ARCA East, and ARCA West. That is really, really exciting stuff, because let's be honest, a lot of people, when they think about Riley Herbst, they don't think he is the most talented driver in the world. But the fact that Riley Herbst has been able to accomplish all that stuff and been able to do that, where he's been the only driver to have all the stats, I think is really, really impressive, to say the least. Granted, he was with Rico Racing at Daytona and kind of got lucky, but still, I think it's really cool to see that he's done that. And to be the only driver to do that stat is absolutely impressive and great to see overall. So I found that really, really cool. Found it very, very fascinating. Found that very interesting. And I'm very happy to see that he was able to do that. I think that's really exciting and great to see overall for sure, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we got a couple Kyle Busch stories we're going to talk about in today's episode, but yesterday Kyle Busch was at the Kaulig Racing shop and was getting everything in his seat fitted for his races with Kaulig Racing. Now, Kyle Busch is obviously returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2023 to run 5 Xfinity Series starts. He'll be racing next week at Las Vegas. He'll be running at Darlington in September, and is going to run a couple other races earlier in the year in the number 10 car in the All-Star Machine. Now, the paint schemes that Kyle Busch is going to run in the Xfinity Series had not been revealed. It wouldn't surprise or shock me if it's leaf filter, considering if you look at his Fires 2, he's got leaf filter on that. So I would not be shocked or surprised if it is leaf filter. That would be the sponsor. But I'm really excited that Kyle Busch is returning to the NASCAR Xfinity Series. I think he's going to be extremely competitive, and I think he's going to be up front in the races this year. So I think it's really exciting that he's coming back to the Xfinity Series. I know a lot of people don't like that he is returning to Xfinity Series, but in general, I think it's great in general to see that he's coming back. And a lot of drivers in the Xfinity Series want to evaluate themselves and see what they're up against and see what they can be able to do. So in general, I'm excited to see that Kyle Busch is returning to the Xfinity Series, and we'll see what he does in the Xfinity Series this upcoming season, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Danica Patrick and Mike Tirico, as they announced on Monday afternoon around 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that they are going to be part of the 2023 Indy 500 broadcast once again. Now, Danica Patrick and Mike Tirico, for the last years, I really believe since 2019, since they started doing the broadcast, I believe both of them have been part of the broadcast since NBC took over the rights for the Indianapolis 500. While Danica Patrick may not have been as great in the Fox broadcast for NASCAR, I think she does a really good job with the Indy 500 broadcast, and I think that's because she's more used to that kind of stuff and has a lot more knowledge of IndyCar than she does of NASCAR. So she's a great addition there. And Mike Tirico is Mike Tirico. I think Mike Tirico is an absolutely incredible presenter. He does a really good job with his presentation of the broadcast, and I would love for him to do some NASCAR presentations maybe in the future as well, which he has in the past. I think he did some Daytona broadcasts back in the day, but he also does a really good job in the NFL as well, and that's really where he really comes from, is the NFL. So I'm really excited both of them are going to be part of the broadcast once again. I think it's good stuff. Really exciting to see, and happy that both of them will be part of the broadcast. I think it's great for IndyCar. Mike Tirico does a good job, and Danica Patrick also does a great job. So really exciting stuff, and really glad to see that both of them are going to be part of the respective broadcasts. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Trackhouse Racing. Now, Oscar Nensky from Sportsnaut put out a really good article around Trackhouse Racing. And he says in the article that Trackhouse Racing has a big announcement within the next 2 weeks. Now, the big question is, what is this big announcement around Trackhouse Racing? Well, I'm going to tell you what this big announcement is, and it's actually around Project 91. Obviously, Project 91, they were talking about maybe running the Daytona 500 this year with Julio Castroneves, but about 2 weeks before, they decided to go against running the Daytona 500. The plan for Project 91 this year is to run all the road course races and the street course race at Chicago. The big question is what drivers are going to be part of Project 91? There's multiple drivers that have been rumored. Jenson Button is a name that has come up multiple times. Jenson Button, of course, has said he wants to run in NASCAR. He'll be running the Garage 56 entry with Jimmy Johnson and Mike Rockenfeller, and he has shown some interest and wants to run that. Another driver that's been interested is Shane Van Gisbergen, and we heard last year that he had been in some conversations to maybe run some NASCAR races. Shane Van Gisbergen, for those who do not know, is a legend of the V8 supercar world, has won multiple Bathurst 1000s, multiple Bathurst 12 hours, and has won a lot of championships and a lot of races. So his name has been brought up in the conversation multiple different times. We know that Daniel Ricciardo's name has been brought up. He wants to test a NASCAR Cup Series car. Why not give him an opportunity maybe? That would be really fun, and I think it'd be great for the sport in general if he got the opportunity to do that. That being said, though, I really am excited for the Project 91 entry when it does officially happen, whenever we do get to see that car out there. They're going to run all the road course races. I'm excited for who they decide to bring in, and I think in general, it'll be really good for the sport, whoever they decide to bring in. So really exciting stuff, and I love it. The Project 91 car is not that far away from being revealed, and we'll see what drivers get announced for the Project 91 car in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Kenny Wallace. As it was officially announced yesterday that Kenny Wallace is going to be joining the SRX in 2023. Now, Kenny Wallace will not be running the full season in 2023 in the SRX. He'll be running the season finale at Lucas Oil Speedway, which is located in Wheatland, Missouri, which is from his home state. Kenny Wallace has been talking about wanting to run in the SRX, has been really praising the SRX. So there have been some conversations that he wanted to race in the SRX, and now he's going to get the opportunity to race in the SRX. Kenny Wallace has a massive and a big personality. And that's one thing the SRX is about, is the fact that they have a lot of big personalities that are involved in the SRX, that do get involved in that. And you have a lot of big personalities that do come in the SRX and race in the SRX. And now you've got Kenny Wallace joining up in the SRX, joining a lot of big names, joining Haley Deegan, who's going to be in the SRX on a full-time basis. Brad Keselowski is going to be part of the SRX on a full-time basis. You're going to have Kevin Harvick involved. You've got Kyle Busch racing the SRX in a couple races. Denny Hamlin's going to run a race or two in the SRX. Bobby Labonte's going to be there. Tony Stewart's likely going to be there. You're going to have a lot of big names that are part of the SRX once, and also Ryan Newman, of course. Having Kenny Wallace part of the SRX, I think, is massive for the sport in general. And to see that you're going to have Kenny Wallace there is going to be fun. He's going to be energetic. I love that he's going to be part of it on ESPN. I'm also very sure to see what other drivers they could get to be that could be part of the SRX. Maybe a Kyle Larson. Maybe they get Chase Elliott. I would love for both Kyle Larson and Chase Elliott to get an opportunity because Chase Elliott has a big fan base and people would tune in. What about Bubba Wallace? but will also be a great driver to bring out. He's got a lot of fans. I would love for him to be part of the SRX. It's going to be interesting to see what drivers they do decide to bring out to the SRX, and we'll see what happens. But there's definitely going to be interesting to see what drivers get to be brought to the SRX in the foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Auto Club Speedway. Now, Austin Kaninsky from Sportsnot.com once again put out a really strong article about drivers who are opposed to the Auto Club Speedway configuration. And there's been a lot of talk, because remember, Auto Club Speedway is going to be reconfigured from a 2-mile track to a half-mile short track. And very recently, especially since we had a really strong race in 2022, a lot of fans do not want this track to change. And some drivers actually agree. So there have been a lot of drivers that have been pushing back against the reconfiguration. A lot of these drivers will talk about this during the Daytona 500 Media Day. First, Ross Chastain says that he wants it to stay the same. He wants the track to stay a 2-mile configuration, and they don't want it to change. Chase Elliott feels a little bit indifferent. He says it's weird, but he feels a little bit indifferent. Next, Ryan Blaney says it should stay the same. He absolutely agrees that it should stay the same. And finally, Daniel Suarez also says stay the same. He wishes it would stay the same. That it's basically too late to change it, but he says he wants to stay the same. Here's my personal opinion about the Auto Club Speedway. I agree with most of the drivers. I wish Auto Club Speedway would stay the same. But unfortunately, I think it's too late. The fact that they've already been taking down grandstands, and the fact there will not be an Auto Club race in 2024, that should indicate that there will not be a race at the track in 2024, indicates that there will not be, the track will be reconfigured from a 2-mile track to half-mile track. It's not the fact that people don't want short tracks. And again, there's a big push for short tracks across the country. The problem is, one, the next-gen car has not raced great on the short tracks, and a lot of fans have not enjoyed the short track racing. So a lot of fans are against the short track racing a little bit until they can change it. Granted, though, they are changing it, and they're going to basically, they've got 2-inch spoilers, so that could definitely help the track. But another reason is because the racing in 2022, like I mentioned, was very, very good. And a lot of fans don't want to get away from that really good racing that happened at Auto Club. So fans really do not want that racing to change. That being said, though, it's unfortunately going to change. The track's going to change, and we really can't do anything about it at this time. I wish there was a way that we could keep the track the same. I wish we could say 2-mile, but the memories that Auto Club has brought, especially over the last few years, in 2022, we had a fantastic race. I remember 2011 when we had that fantastic race and great finish. I remember 2013, the great finish. 2014, where Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson were battling up there. There was a lot of great moments that this track has brought over the years, and I think it would be really exciting. It sucks that they're changing it, but it's not going to change. And again, there is a big push for short tracks across the country, and they're going to unfortunately get rid of Auto Club. It sucks, but it is what it is, and it's just unfortunate. But overall, it is what it is. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about overtimes in NASCAR. Now, after the finish of the Daytona 500, there has been a massive debate around overtimes in NASCAR. And there's a big question about the future of overtimes, especially in the super speedway races. A lot of fans and drivers want these races to stay green. Now, some people, like Chris Dye, say that we should have the ARCA rules where the race has to finish under green. Dale Jr. actually quoted under Chris Knight's tweet, and Dale Jr. says that we should not have any overtimes, and we should go to basically the scheduled distance. There also is something that was tweeted yesterday by Nate Ryan, saying that since the overtime rule has come in, there's only been 6 races that have truly reached 500 miles for the Daytona 500. Now, why is this overtime debate been brought up recently? Well, it's due to this year's Daytona 500. Like I mentioned, with 3 or 4 laps to go, the caution came out for Daniel Suarez spinning out. Kyle Busch was leading, and a lot of people go back to the 1998 race. Imagine if there was a restart in 1998 for the Daytona 500, where Dale Earnhardt would have to hold off drivers like Jeremy Mayfield and Bobby Labonte for the victory, because those were the 2 that were right behind Dale Earnhardt. What are people going to remember more? Dale Earnhardt winning it under caution, or are they going to remember the finish? I'd rather remember what Dale Earnhardt did. And let's be honest, people would have remembered Kyle Busch's win more if it ended under caution, especially after all he's worked for, than that there. Now, here's the thing about overtimes for me. I've been a fan of NASCAR since overtimes have been around. I became a fan back in 2007. Overtimes have changed in NASCAR because I remember the green-white checker rule. But back in 2007, there was only one green-white checkered. The reason that they brought the overtimes in is because of what happened at Talladega in 2004, where a lot of fans are mad about the finish, and there's a huge debate around that. This is my opinion. I personally wish they could maybe stay under green and maybe they go to the scheduled distance because, one, I think there's a really big argument to say that if they went to the scheduled distance, you wouldn't have all the cars crashing. That's a big factor. And you also wouldn't have the major situations where teams get their cars crashed and also get through the TV windows. With the overtimes, you go potentially go over to scheduled windows, and it's a big problem with the coverage, which we'll talk about that here shortly. But I think personally, in my opinion, the overtimes, maybe only go to one overtime, maybe. Go back what it did in the old rules. That's just my opinion, though, or maybe just go back to the overall scheduled distance. So that's a big debate that we'll be talking about, and I think if it comes up in the future, especially at super speedway tracks, it'll be one thing to talk about in the future. So we'll see what happens in regards to that, but it's been a big debate over the last few days, and I've seen a lot of it on social media, and I kind of wanted to talk about that debate, to be honest with you. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the commercial breaks in Fox and the broadcasting presentation in general. So, we are going to talk about Daytona 500 TV ratings here in just a second as well, but let's talk about the commercial breaks. Obviously, on social media, there was a massive complaining, including from myself, I'll admit it. There was a lot of complaining about the amount of commercials during the Daytona 500. Interestingly enough, though, GP Labs put out a really interesting data. He created this interesting thing, which GP Labs is a really good YouTuber. You should go check out. But GP Labs put out a really good article or really good data showing that there were 70 laps that run under commercial in 2023. Interestingly, back in 2001, there were 75 laps that were run under commercial. Basically meaning that 75 of the 200 laps that went, that means about, I think, 37.5% of the race was run under commercial, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that. I think those are the correct numbers. For 78% was about 29 to 30% of the broadcast. Now, what has changed? First thing, the consumer has definitely changed. While the broadcasts have not changed, the advertisements have completely changed. There hasn't been as many advertisements, and there were a lot of advertisements during the broadcast, when they were on, and they wouldn't cut back from sevens. Now, interestingly, Larry McReynolds mentioned this on Sirius 7 NASCAR Radio, and he mentioned that, one, they front-loaded it. I do appreciate Fox on one thing, though. While it was front-loaded, there weren't as many side-by-side. Well, there was not as much advertising going on near the end, and they front-loaded it. But also, what has also changed? Well, you go back to those presentations in 2001. That's one thing that I would, from the 2000s, that I wish didn't change, was going back to the old style of that. This is what has absolutely changed, and I'll get into this. What has changed is the fact that the consumer has changed in the last 22 years. You can't run a broadcast as like 2001 anymore. And I think a lot of this changed because of Formula One. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go completely commercial free. I would love for it to go to commercial free. But if they were to go completely commercial free, you have to pay a lot of money for a streaming service. And I will give Fox defense. They do have to pay their people. They got to pay their camera crews because, from what I understand, Fox brings their own camera crews out there and stuff, and people that work in production. You've got to pay all those people. So I completely understand that. Here's the thing, though. There has to be a better way to present the coverage of these races. I will say this. Fox had a good pre-race show, and they also had a really great commentary until, of course, the end, where there should have been a little more energy for the finish of the race. But that's up for debate in that area. But like I said, there has to be a change in how we do the amount of commercials. Personally, why don't we go back to TNT wide open coverage, or just cut the amount of commercials down, have more side-by-side, because if there were more side-by-side commercials going on, there have been less complaining. I would have complained a lot less. A lot of people complain a lot less on social media because the consumer has changed. And you got to get with the times. And I hope that with the upcoming TV deal, they can find a way to not completely get rid of commercials, because America is commercialized a lot, but also find a way to make it to where there are less full-screen commercials and have a lot more side-by-side. And because you're not going to get rid of commercials completely. You got to find a way to have less commercials, full-screen commercials, and change that up. That's just my opinion, but the consumer has definitely changed, and it's one thing that we'll be talking about for a long time, that we'll be talking about into the future, to be honest with you. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the Daytona 500 TV ratings. Now, the Daytona 500 TV ratings have been officially revealed. We've been wondering about what the TV ratings were going to look like. And according to Adam Stern, Fox earned 8.181 million viewers for Sunday's Daytona 500, which is down 8% from 8.868 million viewers last year. Now, there's a couple interesting things that he notes in this post. First, race was most watched show of the weekend on TV and peaked at 10.1 million viewers. So we still peaked over 10 million viewers at the end. I would have to imagine this near the end of the Daytona 500 is when that number was up. Here's another interesting thing that some people have not talked about. He notes that homes using televisions level went down from last year and race was up in share. Now, a lot of you are wondering about that share number, and that what that share is basically more people are watching it in a home, but less TVs are watching, which means the share was up, which is at least a good thing. Now, obviously, the number being down 8% isn't the greatest thing in the world. But like I've already mentioned near the end of this, mentions that there were less TVs watching. So that does count. Also, the Fox Sports Go app played a role. 180,000 to 190,000 people. I think 183,000 were watching from what they tweeted out today. So that would have increased it a little bit because they didn't count those. But they do also count the streaming numbers from YouTube TV onto that. But they don't count everything onto that. So what happened and why were the ratings at least a little bit down? First of all, less people were watching TV. Less we were watching mainstream broadcasting, but a lot of people will mention that the Super Bowl was up this year, and they were promoting the Daytona 500 a lot, to be fair. But I think another big factor, like I've already mentioned in this episode, was the TV broadcast. I think a lot of younger fans turn off the TV broadcast because of the amount of commercials, and you got to change with the times. I think the fact there were a lot of commercials with the Daytona 500, I think played a role into people turning it off because it was commercialized a lot. The younger audience did play a major role into that, like I mentioned in set. And I think that's why a lot of fans were frustrated. A lot of fans are frustrated with the broadcast, and things have to change going forward because if it doesn't change, but also audience is getting a lot older as well, and traditional TV and less people are watching TV nowadays. And people are going more towards streaming. Now, granted, NASCAR's audience is a lot older, so it's going to take a lot longer for that audience to adapt to go into the streaming side of things than go there. But there are some positives, at least with the Daytona 500 TV ratings, and the positives is the fact that the share was up. That is at least a positive that more people are tuning in those specific areas of that coverage than weren't tuning in. So at least the share was up. But having a big drop like that, 700,000 viewers, I thought the number personally was going to go up a little bit, and I thought that was going to be because of the Super Bowl peak. Because remember, the Super Bowl was watched by I think 113 million or 114 million viewers, and it was the third most watched Super Bowl in the history of the Super Bowl. So I really thought we would get more people tuning into the 500 this year because of that. But it is at least a little bit disappointing that the ratings were down a little bit. But interestingly, that share was up, which at least is somewhat of a positive in that area. Now, what has to change for the ratings to go up long term? First of all, got to get less commercials on TV. Plain and simple. Like I already mentioned with the Fox commercials, they've got to change that in a major, major way. It's going to be one thing that we're going to talk about for a while, and the debate we're going to be having is with the TV presentation. The TV presentation hasn't been good, and Formula One is going to catch NASCAR eventually. It will happen. I know it won't catch and get 8 to 9 million viewers, at least for the foreseeable future, but what if that does happen? What if it does happen, the fact that we see more people tune into Formula One and it increases? I think a lot of it is with the TV presentation because a lot of younger kids are watching the Daytona 500 and they're watching for the wrecks and crashes. And when they see a lot of commercials, they're going to tune out. They're going to tune out and stop watching, and they're going to quit watching. So it has to change going forward with the broadcasts and stuff. I do hope it changes going forward because it needs to change with how the TV broadcasts are presented going forward, and I hope there's a way for them to change that going forward so we can have better broadcasts and better TV in general. So I hope it does change going forward, and we'll see if it does change going forward with how TV broadcasts are presented because I think that's a big factor somewhat why the ratings were down for this year's Daytona 500. So hopefully it changes and it better change going forward because it will continue to decrease going forward into the future, to be honest with you. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Busch. Now, we've talked about Kyle Busch a lot on this channel, especially over the last 2 weeks, and it's because Kyle Busch actually does have a new sponsor for this weekend. Now, they actually have been on Kyle Busch's fire suit, but he will be sponsored by Lucas Oil this weekend at Auto Club Speedway. Now, Lucas Oil, from what I understand, has maybe been a partner of the Rich Trost Racing brand. If they haven't been before, this might be the first time they have sponsored Rich Trost Racing, but Lucas Oil will sponsor Kyle Busch this weekend. This is, I believe, technically the second new sponsor that Kyle Busch has had for the Cup Series this year. Obviously, he will have net spend at COTA and a couple other races down the road. And now Lucas Oil joins up and sponsors Kyle Busch for this weekend and maybe a couple other races as well. This joins on as a list of sponsors that Kyle Busch has had so far this year in 2023 that are technically new to him. 3Chai, Netspend, Lucas Oil now joins that. A couple other companies, I think Lenovo maybe, if I'm not mistaken, is sponsoring him. Alsco Uniforms, which we haven't seen the official car. BetMGM has sponsored Kyle Busch. And Kyle Busch has had some new sponsors come into play. And it's interesting because we all talk about the Joe Gibbs debate, how they were not able to find any sponsors for Kyle Busch. Yet Kyle Busch has already had technically some new sponsors come into play and sponsor him so far, which means Kyle Busch is not completely out of there, where he's not completely the most family-friendly, but he is somewhat family-friendly and has calmed down as a driver. He's gotten 3Chai for crying out loud. He's had other companies wanting to come and sponsor him, and he's got new companies in the Truck Series as well. He's got Xerox Transport sponsoring him for all 5 of his Truck Series races. That's a new sponsor for Kyle Busch, and we've been seeing Kyle Busch continue to get new sponsors and new funding, which plays in the role of the Joe Gibbs metric, where we know that Joe Gibbs wanted to pay Kyle Busch his own personal money, but Kyle Busch is like, I don't want to really trust that. I don't completely trust getting my own personal money right there. I don't completely trust Joe Gibbs in that essence and that aspect right there. But it's interesting when it comes to the whole situation with the Joe Gibbs situation, where you had Kyle Busch wanting to basically get a big sponsor. We know that Oracle was trying to sponsor Kyle Busch, and they were talking about it. And I think 2 factors played a role in why Kyle Busch left Joe Gibbs Racing. First thing was Oracle deciding to back out because Oracle was talking about sponsoring Kyle Busch. That deal fell through. And then also Mark Jr. coming back and returning. I think that played a role. But Kyle Busch has had a lot more different sponsors. But remember, one thing to note is that a lot of these sponsors were on that A car last year with Tyler Reddick. BetMGM, 3Chai, Cheddar's, a couple other companies had already sponsored Kyle Busch at this point. And it's just very interesting to see, though, that he does have a new sponsor. And talking about the paint scheme itself, I want to talk about it. I love the paint scheme. It's very simplistic. I find it very, very creative, and I enjoy looking at these Kyle Busch paint schemes. Some of them have been really good. Some of them could have been a lot better. I thought the 3Chai scheme, though, looked absolutely impressive and looked really, really good. There's been a little controversy around that paint scheme because I'm not going to get into that. But there has been interesting to see that Kyle Busch continues to get new sponsors. And I wonder if Kyle Busch will continue to maybe in the near future, in the not-so-distant future, get new sponsors going forward. It's going to be one thing to watch and see, and maybe Kyle Busch will, in the near future, continue to get a lot more new sponsors and funding, and maybe we'll see Kyle Busch have like 20 or 30 different sponsors, which would take away the narrative that it was due to sponsorship and having trouble finding sponsors. But Joe Gibbs has been able to find sponsorship, and not Joe Gibbs, Rich Rose Racing has been able to find sponsorship at least a little bit more easier than Joe Gibbs was, because Joe Gibbs is looking for that one massive big sponsor. Rich Rose Racing has all those different sponsors that were willing to work with Kyle Busch a lot more easier because it's not a full season sponsor. It's a bunch of different sponsors. So it's very interesting for sure that Kyle Busch does have a new sponsor for this weekend, and it's very interesting to see. So that is for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you're notified when a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Links description below for that, and comment below your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about Kyle Busch having a new sponsor? Let me know in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the other stories, including the Daytona 500 TV ratings? Let me know in the comments below. I might have video later today. I'm not confirming that, but I might have video on the channel later today. Tomorrow we will for sure have race picks for the Auto Club weekend and might have the paint scheme video dropping tomorrow as well. Then on Friday, we're going to have a NASCAR news video. Then on Saturday, we will have the starting lineup video the starting lineup video is going to come out Saturday after it concludes. If qualifying does happen with the weather, because weather is going to be a big factor this weekend. We, of course, do have the Cup review for the Auto Club Cup race that will come out either Sunday or Monday, pending the weather. So anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.